An 87-year-old woman came home from bingo to find her 92-year-old husband in bed with another woman. She became violent and ended up pushing him off the balcony of their 20th floor apartment, killing him instantly. Brought before the court on the charge of murder, she was asked if she had anything to say in her own defense. "Your Honor," she began coolly, "I figured that at 92, if he could have love, he could fly." A couple of friends meet after a long time. "I divorced my wife." One says, "Really? How did you do it?" "We hired a lawyer who helped divide the assets and stuff." "What about the kids?" "Well, we've decided that whoever got more money would also take the kids." "That sounds fair. And who got them?" "The lawyer." A boy says to a girl, "Hey, want to hang out at my place?" She agrees, and he adds, "Just so you know, I share a bunk bed with my little brother. He thinks we're making sandwiches when we're up there, so let's use code words. Cheese means faster and tomato means stronger, okay?" Later, the girl is shouting, "Cheese, cheese, tomato, tomato." Suddenly, the little brother yells, "Stop making sandwiches! You're getting mayo all over my bed." One weekend, a husband was in the bathrooms shaving, minding his own business, when Bubba, the neighborhood teenager hired to mow their lawn, popped by to use the restroom. "Hey there, Mr. Johnson," Bubba called out cheerfully, as if bathrooms were the perfect place for small talk. While chatting through the door, the husband couldn't help but notice how Bubba seemed to radiate a level of self-confidence, usually reserved for lottery winners or people who can parallel park perfectly on the first try. "Bubba?" the husband asked, genuinely curious. "How are you so darn confident all the time? What's your secret?" Bubba grinned, leaning casually against the doorframe like he had all the wisdom in the world. "It's simple, Mr. Johnson. Every night before I hit the sack, I tap my bedpost 3 times for good luck. Works like magic. Keeps my spirits sky high." The husband chuckled, but deep down he thought, why not give it a shot? That night, as he climbed into bed, he decided to put Bubba's quirky ritual to the test. He leaned over, gave the bedpost 3 solid taps, and slid under the covers, feeling oddly optimistic. But before he could settle in, his half-asleep wife stirred, her voice groggy yet suspicious. "Bubba?" she muttered. "Is that you?" My friend, a recent widower, thought it might be a good idea to get himself a dog for a bit of companionship. Checking out the pet ads in the local newspaper, he came across one that read, "Purebred police dog, $25. Thinking that sounded like a pretty fair bargain, he called and ordered the dog to be delivered and paid up front by credit card. The very next day, a van pulled up and left on his doorstep, in a cardboard kennel, the mangiest-looking mongrel he had ever seen. In a bit of a rage, he telephoned the man who had placed the ad and shouted over the phone, "What the do you mean by calling that mangy mutt a purebred police dog?" "Hey, calm down," the man responded. "Don't be deceived by his looks, mister. That dog's undercover and in the Secret Service." Rivka Baumgarten tottered into a lawyer's office. "I want a divorce." "A divorce?" asked the shocked lawyer. "You hoyed me, sonny. A divorce?" "Mrs. Baumgarten, how old are you? 90, just? And your husband?" "Irving, 92. Next month." "Well, how long have you been married?" he asked in disbelief. Tomorrow. 70 years? 70 years? Why a divorce now? Sonny, said Rivka, enough is enough. Joe grew up in Jamaica, then moved away to attend college and law school. He decided to come back to Jamaica because he felt he could be a big shot at home. He really wanted to impress everyone. So he returned and opened his new law office in New Kingston. The first day, he saw a man coming up the passageway. He decided to make a big impression on this potential client when he arrived. As the man came to the door, Joe picked up the phone. He motioned the man in, all the while talking. No, absolutely not. You tell those clowns in New York that I won't settle this case for less than $1 million. Yes, the appeals court has agreed to hear that case next week. I'll be handling the primary argument and the other members of my team will provide support. Okay, tell the DA that I'll meet with him next week to discuss the details. The conversation went on for almost 5 minutes. All the while, the man sat patiently as Joe rattled off instructions. Finally, Joe put down the phone and turned to the man. I'm sorry for the delay, but as you can see, I'm very busy. What can I do for you? The man replied, I'm from Cable and Wireless, the telephone company. I came to hook up your phone. A woman in her 60s rushed into the emergency room, clearly agitated and in distress. She was seen by a young, inexperienced doctor who, after a brief examination, lasting only a few minutes, delivered shocking news. She was pregnant. The woman, overwhelmed by disbelief, bolted out of the examination room and sprinted down the corridor, her screams echoing through the halls. An older, seasoned doctor noticed her frantic state and stopped her. What's wrong? He asked, concern etched on his face. After listening to her tumultuous story, he guided her to a quiet room to help her calm down. The older doctor, now fueled with protective instinct, strode down the hallway to confront the new doctor. What were you thinking? He demanded, his voice firm. This woman is 63 years old. She has 2 grown children and several grandchildren. How could you possibly tell her she's pregnant? Without looking up from his clipboard, the young doctor continued his notes and replied nonchalantly, Does she still have the hiccups? A woman was on the witness stand, accused of poisoning her husband. After you put poison in the coffee, you sat at the breakfast table and watched your husband drink it. Tell me, didn't you feel the slightest bit of pity for him? The defense attorney prompted. Yes, she replied. I think there was one moment when I felt sorry for him. And when was that? When he asked for his second cup. Dave's wife worries he's overworking himself, so for his birthday, she surprises him with a trip to a local strip club. As they arrive, the doorman warmly greets them, saying, Hey Dave, how's it going? Taken aback, his wife turns to him and asks, Have you been here before? Dave shakes his head quickly. No, he's just on my bowling team. They find a table, and soon a waitress approaches with a smile. Hey Dave, should I bring you your usual? Dave's wife narrows her eyes. Your usual? You must come here often for her to know your drink order. Dave waves it off, laughing nervously. Oh no, honey, she's in the ladies' bowling league. We share lanes sometimes. Before his wife can fully process this, a stripper saunters over, wraps her arms around Dave and says, Hi Davey, ready for your usual lap dance? That's it for his wife. Furious, she grabs her purse and storms out of the club. Dave hurries after her and catches her climbing into a cab. Just as she's about to slam the door, he jumps in beside her. His wife lets loose, yelling at him in a fury. The cabbie looks back and grins. Wow, Dave, Looks like you've got yourself another feisty one. A young woman is traveling in Rome for the first time. Feeling a pull towards the grandeur of a beautiful cathedral, she decided to step in and admire the stained glass windows she had heard so much about. As she approached the entrance, a kindly but stern-looking priest emerged. "Excuse me, miss," he said, raising a hand to stop her. "I'm afraid I can't let you enter dressed like that." The young woman tilted her head in confusion. "Like what?" she asked. "My dress is modest." The priest hesitated, clearing his throat awkwardly. "Well, it's not the dress itself. It's just that you are not wearing a bra. I can't let you in like that." "Seriously," said the woman angrily, "I have a divine right." "A divine left too?" "Miss," the priest replied, "but you still can't come in." It's Sunday, and the preacher has just finished an inspiring church service. As the congregation begins to stir, Rick, the wealthiest man in town, stands up and clears his throat. The preacher, familiar with Rick's tendency to speak his mind, lets out a small sigh. "Just make it quick, Rick," he says. "Sure, Father," Rick replies with a confident grin. Rick clears his throat and addresses the audience. "I can still recall the day when I earned my first $1, he begins. "That same evening, I attended a church meeting where the speaker talked about his humanitarian efforts. At that moment, I had only that single $1 to my name, and I had to make a tough decision. Give it to the speaker's cause or keep it for myself. I chose to donate it all, and I truly believe that God blessed that decision, which is why I am a millionaire today," he finished, a tear gleaming in his eye. "Oh, yay," calls out an old woman in the audience. "I dare you to do it again." Two blonde girls were working for the city public works department. One would dig a hole, and the other would follow behind her and fill the hole in. They worked up one side of the street, then down the other, then moved on to the next street, working furiously all day without rest, one girl digging a hole, the other girl filling it in again. Put your ad here. An onlooker was amazed at their hard work, but couldn't understand what they were doing. So he asked the hole digger, "I'm impressed by the effort you two are putting into your work, but I don't get it. Why do you dig a hole, only to have your partner follow behind and fill it up again?" The hole digger wiped her brow and sighed, "Well, I suppose it probably looks odd because we're normally a 3-person team. But today the girl who plants the trees called in sick." One day, the wife comes home flaunting a dazzling diamond ring. "Where did you get that?" her husband asks, curious. "Oh," she replies, "my boss and I played the lottery, and we won. So, I bought it with my share of the winnings." A week later, she walks in wearing a luxurious, shimmering fur coat. "Where did you get that coat?" her husband asks again. "Well, we won the lottery again, so I used my share to buy it," she says, smiling. Another week passes and she drives up in a sleek, fire-red Ferrari. You guessed it, more lottery winnings. That evening, she asked her husband to draw her a nice warm bath while she gets ready. When she steps into the bathroom, she finds the tub barely filled, just enough to cover the drain plug. "What on earth is this?" she asked, confused. Her husband looks up and says, "Well, we wouldn't want to get your lottery ticket wet, now would we?" One day, the wife comes home flaunting a dazzling diamond ring. "Where did you get that?" her husband asks, curious. "Oh," she replies, "my boss and I played the lottery, and we won. So, I bought it with my share of the winnings." A week later, she walks in wearing a luxurious, shimmering fur coat. "Where did you get that coat?" her husband asks again. "Well, We won the lottery again. So I used my share to buy it, she says, smiling. Another week passes and she drives up in a sleek, fire-red Ferrari. You guessed it, more lottery winnings. That evening, she asked her husband to draw her a nice warm bath while she gets ready. When she steps into the bathroom, she finds the tub barely filled, just enough to cover the drain plug. What on earth is this? She asked, confused. Her husband looks up and says, Well, we wouldn't want to get your lottery ticket wet, now would we? A husband bursts into the bedroom, looking unusually excited. His wife, already in bed and scrolling through her phone, raises an eyebrow. What's got you all worked up? She asks, half curious, half skeptical. Grinning from ear to ear, he announces, I've got an idea that's going to change our lives. She sets her phone down, eyeing him suspiciously. If it's anything like your last big idea, I'm not cleaning up the mess this time. Trust me, he says, practically bouncing. This one's foolproof. She sighs, preparing herself for whatever scheme he's cooked up this time, wondering if she should laugh, worry, or just go back to scrolling. A woman named Lily was making her famous apple pie one afternoon when her young daughter, Mia, wandered into the kitchen. As Mia watched, she noticed that before slicing the apples, Lily carefully peeled them and then threw the peels away. Mom, why do you always peel the apples before making the pie? Mia asked. Lily paused, then said, Well, that's how my mom taught me to do it. I guess it makes the pie better. Curious, they decided to visit Lily's mother, Eleanor, to ask why peeling the apples was so important. When they arrived, Lily asked, Mom, why did you teach me to peel the apples before making pie? Eleanor smiled and replied, I'm not sure. That's just how your grandmother taught me. Let's call her and find out. They called Grandma Rose, who lived a few towns away. On the phone, Lily explained the question. Rose chuckled and said, Oh, that's funny. I always peeled the apples because my mother did it that way. Maybe she had a reason. You should ask her. Determined to solve the mystery, the 3 generations of women planned a visit to Great-Grandma Clara, who lived in a cozy little cottage by the lake. After enjoying some tea and catching up, they asked, Great-Grandma, why did you always peel the apples before making pie? Clara laughed heartily and said, Oh, you're all still doing that? I only peeled the apples because the skins were tough and bitter back then. These days, apples are so much better, you don't even need to peel them. The room filled with laughter, and from that day on, Lily made her famous apple pie with the skins on, saving herself time and giving Mia a story she'd always remember. One quiet afternoon, an old blind man wandered into a bar. He tapped his way to a stool and sat down, unaware that he had stepped into a rowdy, all-women biker bar. The bartender, a tough-looking woman with blonde hair, asked, What'll it be? Just a shot of whiskey, the man said with a friendly smile. As he sipped his drink, the blind man decided to break the silence. He raised his voice and said, Hey, you ladies want to hear a joke about blondes? The chatter in the bar stopped instantly. A deep, steady voice came from the woman sitting next to him. Mister, before you go any further, I think you should know a few things about this place. The old man tilted his head, curious. Oh yeah? What's that? She began, her tone calm but firm. First, the bartender is blonde, and she's holding a bat. Second, the bouncer at the door is blonde and doesn't mess around. Third, I'm blonde, 6 feet tall, and a black belt in karate. Fourth, the lady beside me is blonde and can lift twice her weight. And fifth, the woman on your other side is blonde and happens to be a professional wrestler. The blind man scratched his chin thoughtfully. After a moment, he chuckled and said, "You know what? Never mind. I'd hate to have to explain the joke 5 times." The room exploded with laughter, and the veteran grinned, enjoying the moment. A farmer and his brand new bride were riding home from the chapel in a wagon, pulled by a team of horses, when the older horse stumbled. The farmer said, "That's once." A little further along, the poor old horse stumbled again. The farmer said, "That's twice." After a little, while the poor old horse stumbled again, the farmer didn't say anything, but reached under the seat, pulled out a shotgun and shot the horse. His brand new bride yelled, telling him, "That was an awful thing to do." The farmer said, "That's once." A very modest man was in the hospital undergoing a series of tests, the last of which had left his system in disarray. After a few false alarms rushing to the bathroom, he convinced himself the latest urge was another false call and decided to stay put. To his horror, he suddenly soiled the bed, leaving him utterly mortified and unable to think clearly. In a panicked state, he leaped out of bed, grabbed the soiled sheets, and flung them out of the hospital window in desperation. Down below, a tipsy old drunk happened to be strolling by just as the sheets landed on him. Startled and bewildered, the drunk began shouting, swearing, and flailing his arms wildly to rid himself of the mysterious object. After some struggle, the soiled sheets ended up in a messy heap at his feet. As he stood there, wobbling and staring down at the tangled mess, a hospital security guard who had witnessed the entire scene and was struggling to contain his laughter approached and asked, "What's going on here?" The old drunk, still staring at the sheets in disbelief, replied, "I think I just beat the crap out of a ghost." If you're ever having a bad day at work, think of Bob, a commercial saturation diver in Louisiana. His job involves underwater repairs on offshore drilling rigs, and one day his office gave him an unforgettable experience. Bob shared his story in an email to his sister, who later sent it to a radio station hosting a worst job experience contest. Unsurprisingly, she won. Here's Bob's tale. "Hi Sue, I thought I'd share my recent work dilemma to cheer you up. As you know, my office is at the bottom of the sea. I wear a wetsuit and stay warm using a diesel-powered water heater. This machine pumps warm seawater through a hose into my suit, creating a cozy jacuzzi-like environment while I work. Last week, everything was going smoothly until I felt an itch on my Naturally, I scratched it, but the itching turned into a burning sensation. Panicking, I yanked the hose out and realized the heater had a jellyfish, which got pumped into my wetsuit. Since I lack hair on my back, the jellyfish didn't stick there. But unfortunately, the crack of my ass wasn't as lucky. By scratching, I had essentially mashed the jellyfish further into my skin. When I told the dive supervisor about my predicament, his response was laughter. The entire crew was in hysterics while I endured the pain. I had to complete 3 underwater decompression stops, totaling 35 minutes, before surfacing for chamber decompression. When I finally emerged, wearing nothing but my brass helmet, the medic handed me a cream, through tears of laughter, and instructed me to apply it immediately. The cream relieved the burning, but my butt was so swollen I couldn't use the bathroom for 2 days. So Sue, next time you're having a bad day, ask yourself, is it a jellyfish in my wetsuit bad day? Life isn't perfect, but it's still a gift. Bob's story reminds us to laugh through life's challenges. Whenever your workday feels rough, just be glad it doesn't involve jellyfish and a wetsuit. A man is driving down a deserted stretch of highway when he notices a sign out of the corner of his eye. It says, Sisters of Mercy House of Prostitution, 15 miles. He thinks it was just a figment of his imagination and drives on without a second thought. Soon, he sees another sign that says, Sisters of Mercy House of Prostitution, 8 miles, and realizes that these signs are for real. When he drives past a third sign saying, Sisters of Mercy House of Prostitution, next right, his curiosity gets the better of him and he pulls into the drive. On the far side of the parking lot is a somber stone building with a small sign next to the door saying, Sisters of Mercy. He climbs the steps and rings the bell. The door is answered by a nun in a long black habit who asks, What may we do for you, my son? He answers, I saw your signs along the highway and was interested in possibly doing business. Very well, my son. Please follow me. He is led through many winding passages and is soon quite disoriented. The nun stops at a closed door and tells the man, Please knock on this door. He does as he is told, and this door is answered by another nun in a long habit and holding a tin cup. This nun instructs, Please place $50 in the cup, then go through the large wooden door at the end of this hallway. He gets $50 out of his wallet and places it in the second nun's cup. He then trots eagerly down the hall and slips through the door, pulling it shut behind him. As the door locks behind him, he finds himself back in the parking lot, facing another small sign. The sign says, Go in peace. You have just been screwed by the Sisters of Mercy. Once, there was a hat seller named Daniel who often travelled through a dense forest on his way back from the market. One hot afternoon, feeling exhausted from the heat, he decided to take a rest under a large, shady tree. He placed his basket of hats beside him and soon dozed off. A couple of hours later, Daniel woke up to the sound of chatter and rustling leaves. To his surprise, he discovered that his basket was empty. Looking up, he saw a group of mischievous monkeys in the tree, each wearing one of his hats and chattering away. Daniel sat down and thought hard about what to do. Suddenly, he remembered a trick he had heard from his grandfather, who was also a hat seller. His grandfather had once faced the same problem and outsmarted the monkeys. Daniel scratched his head thoughtfully, and to his amusement, the monkeys copied him. Smiling, he removed his hat, and sure enough, the monkeys imitated him again. Confident that the old trick would work, Daniel dramatically threw his hat to the ground. To his shock, the monkeys didn't throw their hats down. Instead, they stopped mimicking him and stared at him. One monkey climbed down the tree, picked up Daniel's hat from the ground, and plopped it on its head. Then, to Daniel's astonishment, the monkey said, Did you really think we'd fall for the same trick twice? We learn too, you know. The monkeys laughed and chattered as they climbed higher into the branches, still wearing the hats. Daniel sighed, realizing he'd have to come up with a new plan. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a banana he'd been saving for lunch. An idea struck him. He held up the banana, waving it enticingly at the monkeys. The monkeys, curious and greedy, started to descend from the tree one by one. Daniel carefully placed the banana on the ground and stepped back. Sure enough, the monkeys threw their hats down to grab the treat. Smiling, Daniel quickly gathered his hats and left the forest, vowing to carry more bananas on his next trip. From that day on, Daniel became famous as the hat seller who outsmarted even the cleverest monkeys, twice. A man nervously entered the women's lingerie department and cautiously approached the saleswoman behind the counter. "I'd like to buy a bra for my wife," he said, clearly out of his element. The saleswoman smiled and asked, "What type of bra are you looking for?" "Type," the man responded, bewildered. "There's more than one type." "Oh, yes," she said, gesturing toward an entire wall of bras in every imaginable colour, style, and fabric. But despite all of this, there are really just 3 basic types. The man, now more confused, asked, "Just 3? What are they?" With a grin, she explained, "There's a Catholic type, the Salvation Army type, and a Baptist type, so which one do you need?" What's the difference?" the man asked, thoroughly puzzled. "Well," she said down, "the Catholic type supports the masses, the Salvation Army type lifts the fallen, and the Baptist type makes mountains out of molehills." A little old lady was strolling down the street, dragging 2 large plastic garbage bags behind her. One of the bags had a small tear, and every so often, a $20 bill slipped out onto the sidewalk. Noticing this, a policeman approached her and said, "Ma'am, you're losing $20 bills from that bag." "Oh, really? Darn it," exclaimed the little old lady. "I'd better go back and try to find them." "Thanks for letting me know, officer." "Hold on a minute," the cop replied. "Where did you get all that money? You didn't steal it, did you?" "Oh no, not at all," she assured him. "You see, my backyard backs up to a golf course, and some of the golfers like to relieve themselves through a knothole in my fence, right into my flower garden. It used to really annoy me because it kills the flowers, you know. Then I got an idea. Why not turn the situation to my advantage? So now I stand quietly behind the fence with my hedge clippers, and when a guy sticks his equipment through the hole, I surprise him. I grab hold and say, 'Okay, buddy, give me $20 or it's coming off.'" The cop burst out laughing. "Well, that seems fair enough. Good luck with that. But just out of curiosity, what's in the other bag?" The old lady smirked. "Not everyone pays."